Can I ask an unrelated question?
If you could find one in the universe.
What about genetics? You know, I live I work in a context where everyone proposes that the answer to every disability and to almost every disease is if we could find the genetics of it. And I know vibrational cause, I understand vibrational cause, but what is it? How does this get encoded in genetics? Why can we see these differences in individuals in the genetic code? And can that be true and not causal?
First, we want to say that if scientists and doctors were really accurately interpreting these genetics, they would be having much greater success than they are in the remedies that they are seeking. And we don't think that there is very much value in finding the problem first and then tracing back to something that they are able to see and giving it the label of causation.
I agree.
Because if it were accurate, then not only would they acknowledge that that is the cause of it, but they would have access to the solution. And they usually do not. It's sort of like hitting a pothole and breaking your tire, breaking your axle, and then someone saying, well, that was the cause of that. And we say, well, yeah, but why'd you drive in the hole? And where was your point of focus? And there's so much more to every story than that, you see.
Is the genetic encoding meaningful for anything, or is it just kind of extra information?
Well, let us ask you some questions. Would you describe it as usually after the fact acknowledgement? So it's sort of, again, you already have the physical manifestation, and now you're looking at genetic coding, which is just more of the physical manifestation. So maybe what they're discovering that they're calling genetic coding is being created right along with the disability.
Yeah.
Maybe it wasn't there for them to see before in that fullest sense. You get what we are talking about?
I do get what we're talking about. That's really helpful to think about.
There are so many people thinking about so many things relative to all of that. And some of it helpful. We are not trying to guide you away from the benefits that you have discovered as you've sifted and sorted through a lot of this. But there is a very big disconnect, and therefore a very big disadvantage that most medicine is experiencing, where they are not factoring in the thing that matters most. And that is the alignment factor, the vortex factor, and the effect of manifestation on it now. So regarding this genetic coding that you're talking about, that's like coming to an end result which you're examining now, and then spending time justifying how you got to that. And every step that is unraveling that is pointed in the wrong direction. Talking about how you got there is completely wrong-headed. It's focused in the wrong direction. When what has actually happened in this culmination of this now experience, which in this conversation we can conclude is unwanted, there is the birthing of a desire that is in that direction. And looking back for causation and lining up with new, clear intention are opposite behaviors and actions and endeavors. So in the same way that we are not really encouragers of trying to figure out why something went wrong, but instead receiving the benefit of the new, clear intentions that are born out of it, whether you are trying to solve a problem or whether you're just wanting a more robust life today than you lived yesterday, you got to be looking in the direction of the vortex, because that's where everything is. The positive emotion that we've been talking about, even here in this conversation, is all about this closing of this gap. And looking for causation is widening that gap every time.
I'm always like overwhelmed by how radical this way of thinking is, how simple and understandable and utterly radical at its roots, this view of vibration and attraction as the center of the universe. And so
it's not radical, it's law-based. It's not irrational. Nothing is more rational. It is a deviation or a departure from the way a lot of people are approaching a lot of things. But we want to say, how is it working out?
Not all that well. When I say radical, I'm totally in agreement with this. But when I think through the number of assumptions that we make about psychology and about genetics, about causality in any sort of human way, it really completely changes the underlying premises of
think
what
about
we're
someone.
talking about.
So someone is given a diagnosis, or they are labeled something in this moment. And in your desire to assist them in now reaping the benefit of what's been born out of it, when you say to them, this is something you were born with, this is something that was inevitably within you, where does that leave you? And knowing what you know about creation, about the laws of the universe, about your reason for being, about the fact that you're here to sift and expand, and about the nature of the universe in helping you to be a cooperative component, you just have to feel with everything that you are the irrational nature of the way most people are looking at it. That is utterly irrational. Once you begin with the basis of how everything works, and you prove to yourself again and again, because we promise you there is not an exception in all of the universe to this. You will not find an exception to this. Where there's an exception, there are endless exceptions to every medical research. There are endless exceptions to every drug, to every pill, to every surgery. Exceptions, exceptions, exceptions. When they find one thing that always works, then you could have a discussion about it. But they have not yet even found one thing that always works. So what is the common denominator? What is the uncommon denominator? What's going on? Why in all of this study and all of this research and all of this causality and all of this looking back for the clue, for the reason, for the beginning of it, why haven't they been able to isolate anything? And it's because they're looking in the wrong direction. They're looking away from where they are. And no satisfaction ever comes from that. You've got to look in the direction of who you are, you see. More and more they are figuring this out. More and more are hearing and listening. And more are beginning, as you are, to actually do the research of alignment. Doing the research of blending. Doing the research of emotion. Doing the research of ease. Doing the research of allowing. Doing the research of getting into the vortex first and then watching what happens, you see. It's interesting. We hold these gatherings. We talk to you that you are deliberate creators. You acknowledge that you are to some extent. You have your comfort levels and you have your endurance levels, and you want to believe, and many of you do. But it is such an interesting thing to notice personally how much you rely on banks of data that are inconsistent in their findings, where if you begin to play the game even a little bit, you will find no inconsistency in your own findings. You'll be able to make an absolute correlation between this feeling and this thought and what happens next. And when the universe begins to deliver to you, not just rendezvous of thought and not just rendezvous of people in the elevator that are pleasant to be with, but rendezvous of well-being in your own physical body, and rendezvous of things that defy the lists that others have been offering. When you show yourself the benefit of alignment, then and only then will you have it. And it doesn't mean that in your having it that anyone else will have it immediately. But eventually it will become the norm. Eventually, as new ones come forth already knowing it, and they begin to blend with those like you who have known it and forgotten it and reestablished your understanding of it, as that balance of population begins to tip, you'll begin to have a whole other life experience relative to all of these things that you are discussing. In other words, there will come a day when someone will say, something is out of whack and I don't feel well, and everyone will just say, oh well, because it's just a matter of focus. Well, you can focus that back into being. You can focus that back into being easily, because it's all about focus. It's all about tapping into intelligence. It's all about tapping into the intelligence. The intelligence of the cells in your body is something to really acknowledge. And when you are getting out of the way of the intelligence of the cells of your body, then all kinds of things begin to happen. And there is documentation of all of that, but because it is seen as radical, then so many people don't allow themselves to go there because they don't have a basis of understanding.